Well, good morning, Patrick. I have Patrick O'Connor with me. He's going to share his business story. And Patrick, I need everyone to listen up, all parents out there, because Patrick, if we could welcome you all into our homes and calm our nerves, you would be the person, because Patrick is the chief strategist and CEO of College is Yours. He comes to us as a college counselor with 38 years behind him. He has dedicated his life to probably calming more parents down than he can probably count, but he's really dedicated to really helping kids, parents expand their horizons and getting into college, understanding the processes. He has been the national, I'm reading a little bit here because I want to get it all right, but he's been the president of the National Association for College Admissions Counseling, and the inaugural School Counselor Ambassador Fellow with the U.S. Department of Education. And he is the author of the highly acclaimed College Counseling for School Counselors and the Student Family College Guide and College is Yours 3.0. I want to make sure I'm holding this up because we're going to talk a lot about this book today, which is the newest book, and the one we've been really putting out there lately and talking about. He lives right here in Detroit, but you speak all over. You've got a program at collegeisyours.com, and I'm going to stop talking because this is going to be your time. And I wish I knew you, because I have done this route of putting 3 kids through college. I spoke to someone the other day and she said, "Oh my God, my daughter's about to hit submit." And all I could say to her was, once she hits submit, just breathe. Just breathe. It's all you can do. You know, your kid has done what she's supposed to. You're a good parent. She's a good kid. Just breathe. They all end up where they're supposed to. But if you backtrack and you start with these kids who, you know, when they were in kindergarten or nursery school, you've got parents out there who across the country who sometimes have a different plan for their kids and think, you know, if I do all these things, I'll get them into the college I want them to go to, or I think they should go to. And my father-in-law used to have a saying that said, "God laughs at those who plan." So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. Sorry, I appreciate it.
But I have to say, and you gave me some questions, and I love it because it says, what's the best advice for parents and students who are about to start the college selection? But I'm gonna ask this question because that's the one question. When do you start the college selection?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. And the answer, as is the case with most things related to applying to college, is it kind of depends on the individual student. For most students, they're really going to be okay to begin looking at the nuts and bolts of colleges sometime probably late in 10th grade.
10th grade, okay.
I usually, the most important thing to remember about the college application is that all successful college applications have one thing in common. They reveal who the student is, and they show that the student has lived a good life. And you can't
So they don't reveal who wrote it for them or their parents or any of those things, parents. It reveals who the student is, because the student's the one who's got to go to college.
Right. That's very important to keep in mind as well. applying to college is basically having the student answer the question, what's next in your life? And in order for you to really provide a great answer for yourself to that question, you need to know what it's like to live. And if you're spending too much time worrying about SAT scores or letters of recommendation or which right summer program to sign up for, that's taking away from the focus of living and understanding what that experience means to you. And colleges can sort that out in an application. So it's important for students to start, with ninth grade. Very often parents think, well, now we got to think about college. Get used to ninth grade. High school is a very different animal than middle school. Make the most of your learning opportunities in and out of the classroom. Make sure that you're understanding what it's like to give back to a larger community through community service. Engage in your life, and you're going to be just fine. In the fall of 10th or in the spring of 10th grade, then it's time to go visit some college campuses. And this doesn't have to be an expensive coast-to-coast exhaustive tour. Your goal here is to find out basically that there are different colleges in the world that do things very differently. And you can do that with a trip to Western Michigan and Kalamazoo and University of Michigan. You can do all three of those in the same day and really start to understand that colleges are very different. There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all college. And then that's when you begin to understand what each college has to offer that means something to you or might not mean something to you. So
it's really interesting. And I don't know that my girlfriend's listening right now, but I did that with my three kids, and my three kids are so different, and what they wanted out of college was very different. But I always tell this story, and that is my older son was walking around a particular campus, and I just loved the campus, loved everything about it.
right.
And my son and my husband are walking around, and I am like, oh my God, isn't this great? Look at this, look, and I really had not caught on to, he was like heading for the car. I mean, he couldn't get to the car fast enough. And I'm like,
Yep.
look at this, and I was like, Ari, don't you love it here? And he said, he's like, I don't see my best friend. And I'm like, what? And he really keyed in on groups of people and just noticed right away, like, those weren't his people. He could really feel it. And I don't know what it was, but that, particular walk through campus, he could really, and we were doing a lot. We were doing the East Coast, and, there was a particular reason, but we did a lot of campuses on that particular trip. Yep. And it became sort of a joke, like when we got to a campus and we'd walk. I mean, I learned very quickly, keep my mouth shut, just walk, say nothing. And, he sort of keyed into certain things, some of these very small schools versus a big school, or, is it in town? Is it, just different elements that didn't even have anything initially to do with in the classroom.
Right.
And I mean, so, there's the campus life, there's that, the dorm, they take you on these great tours, but, all those things before you even get into the studying part of, or getting into, getting into the school.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And actually what you did is exactly the right thing to do. And we talk about this in the book. It's certainly doing the tour and getting the official version of what the college is like is important, but you really do want to have some time where the student by themselves sort of finds the center of campus and sits down and says, do I really see myself here? And college choice is the right mix of opportunity, support, and challenge. And if you don't have one of those three, your experience is going to be pretty difficult to get through. And so it really is important to look at that. I too had a student that I set up with a college that I thought was just going to be ideal for her. And she returned from the visit and said, you know, I was on campus for 2 hours and nobody talked about the books they were reading. And I just thought that was really insightful because it showed me what mattered to her, but it also showed me that she has some good insights about what matters to her.
Mhm.
And again, you know, that's what you get when you know who you are. You're going to make a better choice if you really understand who you are and apply that through the process. So
And
good for you. You did the right thing.
well, and I think that this is a good conversation in that we do have our kids know. We have to give them credit, and we don't always give them credit. We think we know. We've done it, we've gone. It's very different now, by the way. And we do have to let our kids you know, have a voice in
Yeah.
it. You know, one of the things I love about your book, and it was funny, I think I shared with you, I was outside reading your book, and my husband said, "Are you going back to college?" I said, no, and I've done it 3 times, by the way, doing this. But your chapters are amazing, and parents, you've got to, parents, kids, you've got to pick this up because the chapters are just everything you need to know: extracurricular activities, community service. I mean, you have the consideration for the fine arts and performing arts. I needed that one. The athlete, I needed that one. I mean, where were you? I needed you back then. But I mean, it's just such an amazing guide. But there's a couple things that I think are helpful to know. Our school counselors, I think, and granted, my youngest is 24 now, but I think they're busier than ever.
Yes.
What are some of the ways to help our school counselors to help our kids, balance that? How are we? I had such a great relationship with our school counselor. I adored her, and she was so helpful with my kids. But I also sometimes would always start an email going, "I hope I'm not bugging you," and I know it's her job, but I just never wanted to, be bug. I didn't want to be the parent saying, "Am I bugging you?"
Yeah. Well, there are a couple of things you can do. And in fact, there's a chapter in the book that talks specifically about working with your school counselor. And you're absolutely right. Our school counselors, first of all, almost all of them have too many students. Ideally, a counselor is supposed to be working with about 250 students in grades 9 through 12 at a time. And in Michigan, that number is somewhere in the neighborhood of 650.
Mm.
So that should tell you right there that even if all they were doing were their job, the job would be pretty difficult to achieve. When you add on all the mental health needs that COVID has brought forth,
Mhm.
and when you consider that counselors are often asked to do things that have nothing to do with counseling, it can make their day pretty full. So, the advice that we offer in terms of working with your school counselor is to let the student take the lead, and that's really a key component. And this is not to say parents should never talk to the school counselor; they should. But it's important to make sure that the student is taking the lead so that the student really understands how to best work with the school counselor. And by the way, that's what colleges say as well.
Mhm.
When we ask college admissions officers what's the one piece of advice we could give parents, they all say the same thing almost word for word: let the student drive the bus.
Mhm.
And so that's really important. The other thing I think that's important in terms of making an effective relationship with the school counselor, find out how they prefer to be communicated with. Some are still telephone people, some are email people, and some are people who don't mind you dropping in. But find out what works best for them and make sure you give them as much latitude as possible. It's a little tough if you're emailing at 8 and expecting a response by noon. As many parents often do, and it's understandable, you want what's best for your child, but just make sure you establish that relationship early on before the college crunch comes, And that's going to make for a much more effective relationship, as it sounds like you created with your kids. So that's really the key.
So I know you're in Michigan, so you have heard this over and over, but we have a wider audience so people can relate to this. I only want to go to Michigan. I only
Yep.
want to go to Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
And, I heard it in my own house, and that kills me as a Spartan, but that's a different story.
Right.
But the challenge is, that's lovely that you only want to go to Michigan. But as a parent, you have to guide your kid to one, say, think, is that the best school for your personality? But also, you want them to make a list or apply to other schools. How do you parent your child? How do you encourage them to, make the list, and encourage them to do the work, to apply to other schools?
Yep. If I were to pick, two verbs that parents should live by with this process, it's support and encourage. So when a student comes to you, when your child comes to you with something like it's Michigan or it, and that's it, that can be a bit of a challenge. But you start by support and saying, boy, I sure can understand why you like Michigan. It's a great school. It has a strong national reputation. It certainly has strong school spirit. But then you encourage to expand the range, and you say, so that's what I see at Michigan, but tell me, what's there that makes Michigan special to you? And what your goal there is to really get the student to talk about the qualities they're looking for in a college, because that then makes it pretty easy for me as a counselor to say, oh, okay, well, if you're there because you like Michigan's residential program, here are some other big schools with residential programs that also have strong school spirit. If it's because of a particular major, I can say, oh, that's great. Well, here are some other schools that also have a strong major. The particular challenge with a place like Michigan is their admit rate isn't crazy. It isn't like 2%, but it's not terribly big either. And so the reality is, and I'd say to students, there's no question you could succeed at Michigan. The question is whether they're going to run out of room before they run out of good students, and that's never the case. So just in case that happens, we need to talk about some other options for you as well. And once they understand that this is actually the college's problem and not theirs, that liberates them a little bit more to start thinking about some viable options to find places that would work as well.
Patrick, what have you seen, on that note, in regards, because I love the rumor mill we live in.
Oh, yeah.
What have you seen across the country in regards to COVID, and admissions? What is the real truth?
Well, certainly some interesting changes. One of the biggest ones, of course, is that most schools who said you have to have SAT or ACT scores in order for us to decide if you're a good student, somehow have decided to live without them simply because students can't get to the test sites because they're all closed due to COVID. So this has led to sort of a realignment in many admissions offices of what they're looking for in an applicant. This is where grades and essays and letters of recommendation become more important because they don't have the test scores anymore. So that's a pretty big change. The other big change has been the number of students who have to get to know a college through online experiences rather than through visitation. Now that's eased up just a little bit in the past year or so, but colleges have been remarkably good at bringing the campus to the college or to the student online. They're now actually doing live guided tours where the tour guide still shows you the entire campus, and then you can ask questions at the end. So they've been terribly innovative. So my advice to students who are discouraged, thinking, boy, if I don't get to campus, that's going to be a problem. Believe me, The colleges want you. The other piece is that the birth rate in the United States and the number of high school graduates is on a decline for the next 5 years. So that means that colleges are more eager than ever to get more students in, because if they don't, they're going to lose a whole lot of money. So they're looking for new ways to innovate and meet your needs. And so if there's a way that they can do that, they're going to do it.
So I feel like or in the height of the pandemic, maybe not so much this year, there was sort of people taking a gap year, or, you know, has that sort of gone now? People are back to, it's more like normal going back into school? Or?
A little bit. The gap year did show up a little bit more than usual. The other one that we thought was going to happen was that students would start out at a local community college and take online courses and then transfer. That really didn't come to fruition very much. Most students looked at it and said, you know, being on campus means an awful lot to me. So I'm just going to take a year off and wait for things to settle down and see where things are. I think there are still some students who have that perspective this year because of the bump up again in COVID. But my advice to those students is fill out the application, and you can always defer your admissions at just about every school. There are some that don't do this, but you're better off to keep your options open for the fall. If it turns out next April, when you have to decide what college you're going to, if at that point COVID is still a problem, you can call the college and say, I'm taking a year off, and most of them are going to say, okay. So I think you're right. That's a little bit less of a factor than it was, but for students who still wonder, my advice is still apply now, save your spot, and that's the best strategy of strength to work from.
What do you see as if there is a number one sort of anxiety problem, first with parents and second with kids in this sort of process? What do parents sort of get the most angst about?
Well, I think the challenge for most parents is that as adults, they're looking for a recipe for success. You know, if you want to get admitted to Michigan State, you do this, 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 and this. If you want to get admitted to UCLA, well, you don't do that, you do this instead. And there are remarkably few schools that where that plan is going to work, simply because if they follow a recipe or a fixed formula, they're going to get a lot of students who look the same, think the same, and have the same major. And that just doesn't make a very interesting college experience. So the fact that so many answers to the process is it depends drives parents crazy because you can't control it depends.
Right.
So I think that's a challenge for the
they've been in the driver's seat for the 13 years more or less.
Oh, right, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, keeping in mind that part of this process too is just simply that your child is older and needs to again drive the bus in life, not just in college. So
right.
For the students, I would say honestly it's two things. The first thing that tends to cause the most concern are the college essays. In terms of the actual application process, they're happy to look at colleges there, but it's astonishing. The students I've worked with spend hours on social media talking about themselves very freely and openly and articulately. But then all of a sudden, if you say, well, okay, share some of that with a college, they freeze right up and they think it's a speech or they think it's a book report and it's really just a conversation. And we talk about this a lot in the book. What you really, if the college could, they'd bring you to campus and talk to you for 2 hours. They don't want you to write an essay, but they can't do that. They have too many applicants. This is a conversation on paper. And so if the student really treats it that way, they're going to come up with an effective narrative that shows who they are behind their numbers and behind the letters. And that's really the goal with the essay. The second thing I'll add just really quickly that causes student anxiety, and I just have to be honest, is parents. And that's why, again, in the book, there's this very specific chapter that talks to parents about how to communicate college with your child in a way that keeps you in the loop, because you need to be in the loop, but also, again, puts the student at ease through the process. So that's such an important component, because again, the goal is to put the student in a position where they're comfortable enough with their options, where they can make the best choice for them.
Well, I will tell you that it gets easier when you have more kids, because you kind of learn that, unfortunately. So
Yep.
Parents of first children, I don't want to say you're screwed, but your poor first children, because you do learn along the way. My three were such different processes of the things, but you sort of do learn. And when you have three such different children of different paths of the college, but I have learned, and I have also learned that they really do land where they're supposed to land. I have watched that with, such good friends of mine whose kids they want only Michigan, and they get deferred or they don't get in, and they're at Michigan State and they thrive like no other, and happy as could be, or the reverse. And it's, or they're at Indiana, or somewhere with that Big Ten spirit, just like Michigan or Michigan State, and just so happy, and they can't even believe, like that's what happened, and they're happy, and it's, it used to be in thought like, oh boy, that junior year is so hard, all the test taking. And I quickly learned that no, that fall term of your senior year is a little more, it's a little more stressful as a parent, because you're watching your child and you can't help them. You really can't. You like you said, you have to support and encourage them. That's what you can do best for them. But you can't fix it. You can't, if the deferment letter comes, you support and encourage. If the we think you're great, but we're not going to take you letter comes, there's someplace else for them. And, and that's, it's hard for them because sometimes it's the first time they've been rejected from something they wanted. And that's why, I've got to tell everyone again, please pick up your copy. There's a glare, I know. College is Yours 3. Amazon is a great place to grab it. Go to orcollegeisyours.com. Patrick has, it's in my link today. Patrick has some great resources, classes, books. You don't have to go this alone, parents and students, but it is a process. I know a lot of parents are, watching their kids start to hit submit soon. And
well, and it's certainly
breathe.
Yeah, and it's certainly not too early for the juniors to pick up the book and try and understand the best approach to take. And that's really what I like about this book, and I'm very proud of. It's a different approach to college in general. And let me just say real quickly too, if parents are expecting a heavy read, you are going to be disappointed. These chapters are brief, and they are meant to be referred to again and again. So I
can say that I sat outside and just whipped through it, and I felt badly, thinking like, boy, I wish I had known that, Well, so maybe I should go back to college.
Well, either that or help some other kids get into college. But
absolutely,
the chapters tell you what to do without making it onerous, and that's the whole goal. We don't want anybody to, we want this to be an interesting hobby till about Thanksgiving of senior year, and then after that, let's get back to business as usual, living the great life that you've created for yourself.
Right.
That's our belief here at College.
Right. And for the parents who have 10th graders out there, start thinking about, we made a great spring break with our son, visiting colleges. We ate great. we watched a few lacrosse games, which was, part of the goal. And
Yep.
we had a great time, and it was amazing family bonding. And we did sit back in places and let him, it makes your kid have to go knock on the door of a coach or admissions office. They don't get to walk in with you. Parents, that's important. The coaches or acting coach, they don't want to see the parents,
Yeah. No, it's all about
Yeah.
the kids. And there is some advice in the book for both 9th and 10th
Mhm.
grade parents about how to be college ready without being college crazy.
Yeah.
So, again, even for our younger students, for the parents in particular, those chapters can be very helpful and, more important, very reassuring.
Yeah. Well, pick up your book. Patrick, thank you so much. I
Oh,
look forward
sorry.
to
Thank
seeing.
you. It's been great chatting with you.
Great. Have a great day. We'll see you
You
soon.
too.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.